I would love to hear how you got the job to work on Rogue One. You were telling us just before we started that you wrote the whole thing from scratch. So, and then of course you got revisions and all that. So take us through everything.
Well, so let me first just clarify that to make sure
Sure.
that I'm not, claiming more credit than I'm due. So John Knoll, who, as you of course certainly know, is kind of legendary, one of the pioneers of industrial light and magic, and is still there in a very senior capacity and still does all kinds of amazing work. John was actually the guy that came up with the idea of doing the first Star Wars, story that could be separate from the Skywalker saga. And his idea was, why don't we tell the story of the rebels that stole the Death Star plans? He basically wanted to tell the story of the opening crawl, rebel spies. During the battle, rebel spies stole the secret plans. And that was his big idea. And he took it to Kathleen Kennedy and pitched her on the whole concept. And she dug it. He had like a whole presentation. But John's not a writer. He's a visual effects guy. And so they're like, well, we need someone to develop this storyline. He didn't just have an idea. He actually did have I think it was like a 2-page document that laid out very, very early versions of, Jyn Erso and K2, and like some of the characters were there, but they didn't have it fleshed out. They weren't ready to make a movie yet. And so where I came in was, man, it's funny. I still remember where I was when I heard that Disney had bought Lucasfilm and that Star Wars was coming back. After having kind of laid fallow for so many years, I was standing in line at a Popeye's fried chicken waiting for my order, and I was just scrolling through Twitter on my phone, just bored, as you do. And my Twitter blew up, and it was because of the news that had happened. And it wasn't even, they haven't even announced JJ at that point. If you remember, it was Michael Arndt had been announced that was going to write what at that time was just known as Episode 7. They were going to do 7, 8, 9, but there was no talk yet about standalone films or anything. That all came later. But I remember immediately swiping away from my Twitter app and going to my phone and calling my agent and saying, I know that all your clients are calling you today, but you got to get me in the room for Star Wars, because that's, that's why I do what I do. And obviously this would be a dream. And I was fully aware of the fact that there was hundreds of writers above me in the pecking order. One of the luxuries of working on or running a franchise like Star Wars, if you're Kathy Kennedy or Dave Filoni or whatever, who doesn't want to come play with you? It's Star Wars. And so you can attract all this top tier talent. And you look at Michael Arndt, one of the biggest screenwriters in Hollywood, was the first person there. I'm not on Michael Arndt's level, not even close. And so I thought, listen, I'm not going to, there's no way they're even going to take a meeting with me, but you got to shoot your shot, right? The 10-year-old kid in me is never going to let me go to sleep at night if I don't at least try. And so my agent said, yeah, I'll try, but you know what the odds are. Yeah, of course, but you got to try. And then some time went by and I could basically kind of forgot all about it. And then my agent called me back and said, do you want to take a meeting with Lucasfilm? They're interested in meeting you on a general thing. So absolutely. And I live up here in San Francisco. Most of Hollywood obviously is down in LA. Oh, cool. But Lucasfilm's kind of split. They have offices down at the Disney compound in Burbank, but they also have Lucasfilm up in the Presidio here in San Francisco, which is just around the corner from me. So let's set it up. And I was super excited to go. They have a beautiful campus there at the Presidio. And I sat down and I was very nervous. I had no idea. There was no prep. It wasn't get ready to pitch or anything. It was just they want to meet you. And going for a meeting at Lucasfilm is kind of like going for a meeting like the CIA. They're so secretive and they tell you nothing. And so I went in knowing nothing, and I sat down with these two amazing people who I came to love, Kiri Hart, who used to run the story group at Lucasfilm, and Rain Roberts, who was another senior story executive there. Kiri since moved on, but Rain is still there in quite a senior position now. I think she runs the whole film group. And they sat me down and I was like, why am I here? I love Star Wars, but do you want me to pitch you ideas? What's going on? And they were just no, we just want to talk to you. We're obviously talking to a lot of writers. We've got a lot of projects cooking right now, and we want to basically just get a feel of who's out there and what kind of projects we might want to plug them into. They weren't interested in hearing outside pitches. They already kind of had a plan for what they wanted to make. It was a question of can we find the right writers to pair up with the right projects? Right. And so I just talked to them about my love of Star Wars. I talked to them about how when I was a kid, I was 11 years old, I cried at the end of Return of the Jedi because I was so overcome with emotion, and how I would take my Han Solo action figure and put him in the ice cube tray and stick him in the freezer and freeze him in carbonite and then thaw him out under the warm tap. And just how much, I just told all my little anecdotes and stories about just how much I love Star Wars.
Yeah.
And I kind of got the impression that maybe they were talking to me because I knew obviously that there was going to be a big multimedia effort. There wasn't just going to be films. There would be television. There would be comic books. There would be video games, which is the world I come from. There would be all of these things, novels. And I thought I'd be happy to have done any of those things. I wasn't snobby about it. I thought anything that was Star Wars, just to contribute just a small piece to that canon, would be a dream come true. And they said, okay, well, nice to meet you. And I left knowing nothing more than I went in with, and I waited around for a while. I thought, oh, they've forgotten about me. They've found someone else that they liked for whatever project they may have been thinking of me for. But they did call back and said, hey, we're going to send you a document to look at. And they sent me this PDF, and I opened it up, and it was this thing called Destroyer of Worlds. And that's what it was called at the time. That was John Knoll's kind of code name for it. And it was like this 2-page document that basically laid out this idea of a team of rebels that steal the plans of the Death Star and set up, what would go on to be A New Hope. And I genuinely called them and said, I think you've sent me the wrong document here, because this appears to be a treatment or an idea for a feature film. Like, surely that's not. And they go, oh yeah, no, what do you think? I said, oh my God, absolutely. Like, I'm in, seriously.
Yeah.
And I kind of felt like very out of my depth. I was like, oh my God, you would have told me about like a live action feature film. Surely there's someone better. And I almost kind of talked my way out of the job. But they said, come in and pitch us some ideas for it. Now you know what it is. And I went back in, and John Knoll was in. Again, anyone who knows the Star Wars universe, you walk into a room and John Knoll's there, you instantly kind of like, this guy's a legend. And John was the guy who came up with the original idea for the story. And so it was me and John and Kiri, and I can't remember who else may have been in the room, but I basically pitched him like my whole idea was like, basically this is a World War II men on a mission movie. Like, I love those movies when I was a kid. I love Guns of Navarone. I love The Dirty Dozen, all that kind of stuff. Kelly's Heroes, Where Eagles Dare. And I was thinking particularly about Where Eagles Dare. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, but Clint Eastwood and Richard Burton play these Allied soldiers that have to kind of dress up like the Nazis in order to infiltrate like a German, castle fortress on top of a mountain. And it's all very cool. And I remember thinking like, that you can imagine like our rebel heroes having to dress up like Imperial officers to infiltrate a base and that kind of stuff. And it was drawing on all of those kind of classic World War II influences. And then I also meant the other thing I mentioned was Zero Dark 30. I thought like this movie could have like a Zero Dark 30 kind of vibe. And I imagined Jyn as this kind of character who's much like Jessica Chastain's character in this, the one person going, she's saying, Osama bin Laden's in this house. You got to listen to me and take this seriously. I imagine Jyn as the one person in the rebellion saying, the rebels, the Empire's building this thing, and you have to take me seriously. I've got all this evidence that the Empire's building this thing that would come to be known as the Death Star. I need to take me seriously. That was kind of my way in. And again, left the meeting without knowing anything. It's not like they hired me in the room or anything, but then they did come back and asked me to, then they wanted me to meet with Gareth and eventually with Kathy and eventually, and then the head people at Disney. And it was all these kind of levels and levels of kind of getting signed off on by different people. And finally, I got the job. And I found out subsequently after I got the job, John showed me the book that he used to pitch Kathy Kennedy on making the movie in the first place. And it had all these references in it. And I was flipping through it. It was Dirty Dozen and Kelly's Heroes and Zero Dark 30. Cool. And it was just all the same. We were just on the same page in terms of what we thought like the cinematic reference points for the movie were. So I just got lucky in that my initial instinct for what the movie could be dovetailed with what John originally had in mind. And that's why they said, yeah, this guy. So, sometimes you just got to be in the right place at the right time, I guess.